Aisha sat by her sewing machine, the rhythmic hum of the needle a soothing contrast to the chaos of the Lagos streets outside. Her fingers expertly guided the fabric, creating another masterpiece for an elite client. At 32, she had built her fashion empire from the ground up, proving that a woman didn't need a man to succeed. Her mother, however, disagreed. "Aisha, when will you give me grandchildren?" Mama's voice rang out from the doorway, her arms folded across her chest. "All your mates are married, yet you sit here sewing cloth like a market woman." Aisha sighed, her patience thinning. "Mama, I've told you. I will marry when I find someone who loves me, not my success." Her mother scoffed. "And when will that be? The men you reject today might be your only chance." That night, Aisha sat by her bedroom window staring at the moonlit cityscape. Her heart longed for a love story that was hers, untouched by greed or expectations. But deep down, she feared love might never come. The gala at Echo Hotel was packed with the city's elites. Aisha had been invited as one of the guest designers, her work now adorning the most powerful women in Lagos. She sipped her champagne, feeling out of place among the wealthy socialites discussing vacations in Dubai and Paris. Then she saw him. A tall, striking man in a well-tailored suit stood at the bar, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on hers. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent an unexpected thrill down her spine. She looked away, only to find him walking toward her. "Miss Aisha, I presume?" His voice was deep, confident. She frowned. "And you are?" "Femi," he said smoothly. "Femi Lawal. I've heard about you." Aisha raised an eyebrow. "Good things, I hope." He chuckled. "Very good things. And now that I've met you, I see that the stories don't do you justice." Aisha wasn't easily charmed, but something about Femi was different. His presence was magnetic, his gaze intense yet warm. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen not for her wealth, but for who she was. Little did she know she had just met the man who would change her life forever. Femi was unlike any man Aisha had ever met. Their first conversation at the gala stretched late into the night, weaving through topics of art, business, and life dreams. He was attentive, listening to her every word as though she were the only person in the world. Over the next few weeks, he pursued her with a quiet determination. Flowers arrived at her office daily. White roses, her favourite. He took her to hidden gems in Lagos, places she had never known existed, away from the noise and pretension of high society. One evening, as they walked along the marina waterfront, Femi stopped and held her hand. "Aisha," he said softly, "I know what people say about you, that you don't need a man. But have you ever thought that maybe you don't need just any man, but the right one?" Aisha's heart pounded. She had been so careful, so guarded. But with Femi, she felt safe. She nodded, whispering, "Maybe I have now." That night they shared their first kiss under the stars, and Aisha felt for the first time that she had found something real. Months passed, and Aisha found herself falling deeper in love. Femi was kind, intelligent, and successful in his own right. He owned several businesses, had a luxurious home in Lekki, and never once made her feel like she had to change to fit into his life. But there was one thing that nagged at her: his past. Every time she asked about his family, he brushed it off with a charming smile. "They live far away," he would say, or "We're not very close." At first, she let it go. Not everyone had a close-knit family, she reasoned. But as their wedding approached, she found it strange that not a single family member showed up for the introduction ceremony. "Where are your parents, Femi?" she finally asked one evening. His smile faltered. "They're gone." "Gone where?" He hesitated, then simply said, "I don't like to talk about it." Aisha wanted to push further, but something in his eyes told her to stop. Instead, she reached for his hand and squeezed it. "It's okay," she whispered, even though she knew something wasn't. Aisha and Femi got married in a beautiful but intimate ceremony. It was a quiet affair, no relatives from his side. only a few of his close business associates. But Aisha was happy. Love had found her, and that was enough. They moved into Femi's grand mansion in Lekki, a stunning house by the water with marble floors and a spiral staircase that seemed to touch the sky. "You live here alone?" Aisha asked the first time she stepped inside. Femi smiled. "Not anymore." As days turned into weeks, their marriage felt like a dream. Femi was the perfect husband, attentive, loving, and deeply devoted to their children, BC and Tolu, who came into their lives soon after. But the house felt strange. There were rooms she wasn't allowed to enter, places in the house that always seemed cold, no matter how hot Lagos was. The housekeeper, an elderly woman named Mama Risi, never stayed past dark. "It's not good to linger in big houses at night," she once told Aisha cryptically. Aisha laughed it off, but deep down a small, unshakable feeling of unease began to grow. Femi was the perfect husband, but he was also a man of many secrets. He never spoke of his childhood, had no old photographs, and whenever Aisha suggested travelling to his supposed hometown, he found an excuse to delay. Then there was the night he disappeared. It was just past midnight when Aisha woke up to find his side of the bed empty. At first, she thought he had gone downstairs for a drink, but when she checked, the house was silent. She searched every room but found no sign of him. His car was still parked outside. His phone lay on the nightstand. And then, just as suddenly as he had disappeared, he reappeared, standing by the window, staring out at the dark waters of the lagoon. "Femi," Aisha whispered, her heart pounding. He turned, and for the briefest moment she could have sworn his face looked different, paler, shadowed. "I was just thinking," he said, forcing a smile. "Come back to bed." Aisha hesitated, but finally she lay down beside him. Yet sleep did not come, because for the first time she began to wonder who exactly had she married. Aisha couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her bones. Femi was the perfect husband. Too perfect. He had no past, no childhood stories, no family. Everything she knew about him started from the moment they met. One afternoon, while Femi was out, she decided to dig deeper. She searched through their home office, flipping through drawers and cabinets, looking for anything that could tell her more about the man she had married. She found business documents, bank statements, and even property deeds. His name was on everything. But there were no birth certificates, no family photographs, no old passports. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere. Then she found something odd, an old leather-bound journal tucked away at the back of a shelf. She flipped through its pages, her heart pounding. The handwriting was unmistakably Femi's, but the dates were strange, entries from over 20 years ago, long before he should have been an adult. She closed the journal, a cold sweat breaking out on her skin. The man she had married wasn't just secretive, he was impossible. Despite her growing unease, Aisha found happiness in motherhood. When their first child, BC, was born, Femi was overjoyed. He held their daughter with a tenderness that melted Aisha's fears, whispering to her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "She will always be protected," he promised, his voice filled with something almost reverent. But as BC grew, strange things started happening. Sometimes, she would stare at the empty hallway and giggle, as if someone unseen was playing with her. Other times, she would point at the shadows and say, "Daddy's friend." Aisha dismissed it as a child's imagination, but one night, as she rocked BC to sleep, the baby let out a sudden cry and pointed at the corner of the room. Aisha turned, and for a split second, she saw it. A dark figure standing in the shadows. Watching. She screamed, clutching BC close. Femi ran in, his face unreadable. He didn't ask what happened, he just whispered, "It's okay," and held her until she stopped shaking. But Aisha knew, whatever she had seen wasn't her imagination. Years passed, and their second child, Tolu, was born. Life seemed almost normal again. Aisha buried her questions, focusing on her children and her thriving fashion business. but she couldn't ignore how strange Femi sometimes acted. He never aged, not a single wrinkle, not a single grey hair. He never got sick, never tired. And he still refused to talk about his past. One day, while sorting through baby clothes, Aisha found a small old locket in the bottom of a drawer. Inside was a faded photo of Femi, standing with people she didn't recognize. But what made her blood run cold was the date written on the back, 1993. That was impossible. Femi looked exactly the same. Aisha clenched the locket in her trembling hands. She couldn't ignore it any longer. She needed to find out the truth. One night, unable to sleep, Aisha walked down the quiet halls of their Lekki mansion. She heard murmuring. Femi's voice. She followed the sound to his office, where she found the door slightly open. Femi stood alone, whispering to someone who wasn't there. "I know," he said softly. "I don't have much time left." Aisha felt her breath hitch. She pushed the door open, and Femi turned, startled. "Aisha," he said, his face unreadable, "why are you awake?" "Who were you talking to?" she asked, her voice shaking. Femi hesitated, then smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just myself." But Aisha knew. He was lying. The next day, Aisha decided she had to do something. If Femi wouldn't tell her about his past, she would find out herself. She hired a private investigator. "I need you to look into someone," she told him, sliding a photo of Femi across the table. "Find out where he came from. Find out who he really is." The investigator looked at her curiously, but nodded. "I'll see what I can find." Days passed. Aisha waited, nerves eating away at her. Then the call came. "I found something," the investigator said, his voice hesitant. "But you might not like it." Aisha's heart pounded. "Tell me." The next words sent ice through her veins. "Your husband died 20 years ago." Aisha felt the room spin. "That's not possible," she whispered. "He's alive. He's here. We have children together." The investigator sent her a scanned newspaper clipping. It was an obituary. The name, Femi Lawal. The photo, her husband. The date of death, 1999. Aisha dropped the phone. She ran upstairs, tearing through the attic, searching for anything that could prove this was some horrible mistake. And then she found it. A dusty box hidden under a pile of old clothes. Inside were old photographs, letters, and documents. And right at the top, the same obituary. Aisha's hands trembled. She turned to the doorway, expecting Femi to walk in at any moment, but for the first time she felt something chilling settle inside her. The man she had married when Aisha was not supposed to be alive. Aisha's heart pounded as she held up the obituary in trembling hands. Her voice was raw with disbelief. "Femi," she whispered, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me this is some kind of sick mistake." Femi stood frozen, staring at the yellowed newspaper clipping in her grasp. His usually warm, reassuring eyes were unreadable, filled with a sorrow she couldn't comprehend. "Aisha," he began, but his voice faltered. "Say something," she demanded, stepping closer. "How is this possible? You're here. You're standing right in front of me." Femi sighed, his shoulders slumping. He reached out as if to touch her, but hesitated mid-air. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he murmured. Aisha recoiled. "So it's true," her voice cracked. "You're dead?" Femi clenched his jaw, exhaling deeply. "I was," he admitted. "Once." The room spun around her. Her knees buckled and she gripped the edge of the table for support. "How?" she choked out. "How is this possible? I married you. We have children together. You're alive, Femi." A flicker of pain crossed his face. "No, Aisha," he said softly. "I only borrowed time, and that time is up." A cold dread spread through Aisha's chest. "What are you saying?" she asked, stepping towards him, as if proximity could tether him to reality. Femi closed his eyes briefly before looking at her again. "I love you, Aisha," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I always have. But I can't stay anymore. and then he began to fade. At first, it was subtle. The edges of his form shimmered like heat waves in the sun. His features grew hazy, like a reflection in rippling water. Aisha gasped. "No." She reached for him, but her hands passed through his. "Femi, don't do this." Tears streamed down her face as his outline blurred, his body dissolving into nothingness. His gaze lingered on her, sorrowful and loving, even as his form disintegrated. "I never wanted to leave you," his voice echoed, softer now, distant. "Forgive me." And then he was gone. Aisha dropped to her knees, her breath ragged. The room was unbearably silent. The love of her life had just vanished, and she was alone. The morning light filtered through the windows, but the mansion felt colder than it ever had before. Aisha barely remembered stumbling to bed after Femi disappeared. Had it even happened? Maybe it had been a horrible dream. Maybe she'd wake up to find him beside her sleeping peacefully. But his side of the bed was cold. With a sinking heart, she forced herself out of bed and wandered into the kitchen. The scent of coffee still lingered in the air, but there was no sound of Femi moving around, no gentle hum of his presence. Then she saw it, a single white envelope on the dining table. Her name was scrawled across it in Femi's handwriting. Her breath hitched. Slowly she reached for it, hesitating before peeling it open. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Aisha, I know you must be scared, confused, and hurt. I never wanted it to happen this way. I never wanted you to find out. But the truth has always been waiting for you. I loved you from the moment I saw you. I never planned to fall in love. I never thought I was allowed to. But you made me feel alive again, in ways I never imagined possible. I wasn't supposed to stay this long, but I did, because I couldn't bear to leave you. Time is cruel, my love. I have borrowed all that I could, but now I must return what was never mine to take. I hope you can forgive me. Take care of Bisi and Tolu. Everything I own, my businesses, my wealth, my legacy, is now yours. I leave it all to you because you are my heart, my home. I know you will find a way to move forward. You are the strongest person I have ever known. Please, Aisha, don't cry for me. Know that I will always love you. Forever, even beyond this life. Femi." Tears dripped onto the paper as Aisha clutched it to her chest. He was gone. And yet, in some way, he was still here. But nothing could change the truth. She had married a dead man. The house in Lekki felt different now. The warmth was gone, the air heavy with a suffocating silence. Every corner reminded Aisha of Femi, the way he would kiss her forehead in the morning, the way he would laugh as he played with the kids, the way his presence had filled every inch of their home, and now it was just empty. Mama Risi, the housekeeper, arrived that morning, her usually sharp eyes soft with understanding. "You found out," she said simply. Aisha stared at her, stunned. "You knew?" Mama Risi sighed, setting down the groceries she had brought. "I suspected," she admitted. "Strange things happen in this house. Shadows move when no one is there. The master never eats much, he never falls ill, and he always avoids the sunlight in the early morning." Aisha shivered. How had she not seen the signs before? "What do I do now?" she whispered. Mama Risi looked at her, then at the children playing in the living room, oblivious to their father's fate. "You live, my dear," the old woman said gently. "You take what he left you, and you live." But could she? Could she ever live knowing the man she loved had never truly belonged to this world? In the days that followed, Aisha received a flood of legal documents. Femi had been meticulous. Everything had been prepared for this moment. Bank accounts, business shares, real estate. She was now one of the wealthiest women in Lagos. But what was the price of such fortune? She sat in Femi's old study, staring at the stacks of papers. The world saw her as a powerful woman, but inside she was shattered. A knock at the door startled her. It was a lawyer, a stern-looking man with glasses perched on his nose. "Mrs. Lawal," he greeted her. "I'm here to finalize your inheritance." Aisha nodded numbly, letting him in. "Before we proceed, there's something you should know," the lawyer said, shuffling through his documents. Aisha's brow furrowed. "What is it?" He hesitated, then handed her a file. "Femi left you a second letter, one that was only to be opened after you received everything." Aisha's pulse quickened. She took the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. "My love, if you're reading this, then you now own everything I have left behind. But there's one last thing you must do. Find the truth about me, about who I was before I met you. Only then will you understand why I came back. Go to my hometown. Visit my grave. The answers are waiting for you there. Only then will you know the full story. And Aisha, be careful. There are others who do not want you to know the truth." Aisha's breath caught. What did that mean? What truth was still buried? And who didn't want her to find it? Aisha sat in stunned silence, staring at the letter in her hands. Go to my hometown. Visit my grave. The answers are waiting for you there. Her heart pounded. How could she visit the grave of a man who had been living with her for years, holding her, loving her, fathering her children? She reread the last line. There are others who do not want you to know the truth. Her fingers trembled. Who were these others? And why didn't they want her to uncover Femi's past? Mama Risi knocked lightly on the door. "Madam, you are shaking," she said, concern in her voice. Aisha exhaled, forcing herself to be calm. "Mama Risi, do you know where Femi's family was from?" The old woman's face darkened. "I only heard whispers," she said carefully. "Long ago he mentioned a place in Ogun's state, a village called Idara, but he never spoke of it again." Idara. Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. "Then that's where I'm going," she said, standing up. Mama Risi reached for her wrist. "Madam, think carefully. You are a mother now, whatever lies in that village. Femi did not want you to find it easily." Aisha swallowed. "If he didn't want me to find it, he wouldn't have left this letter." Mama Risi sighed but nodded. "Then go, but take someone with you. Do not go alone." Aisha knew exactly who to call. Early the next morning, Aisha met with Detective Kohler, the private investigator she had hired before. He sat across from her in a small cafe in Victoria Island, sipping coffee as he listened to her story. "You want me to take you to a village where your dead husband is buried?" he asked skeptically. Aisha nodded. "I need to know the truth." "There's something about his death that doesn't add up." Kohler rubbed his chin. "And you're sure you want to do this?" "Wouldn't you?" she challenged. Kohler sighed. "All right, I'll drive you. But if anything seems off, we leave immediately." Aisha agreed, though a deep sense of unease lingered in her chest. Something told her that once she started this journey, there would be no turning back. The drive to Idara was long and unsettling. The closer they got, the more the landscape changed. Lush greenery surrounded them, but the road itself seemed forgotten. As if few people ever travelled this way, Aisha gripped the armrest of the car. "It's so quiet." Kohler nodded. "Too quiet?" When they finally reached the village, an eerie silence hung in the air. The few villagers they saw watched them with wary eyes, their whispers following them as they walked past. Aisha approached an elderly man sitting under a tree. "Excuse me, sir. Do you know where I can find the grave of Femi Lawal?" The man's expression darkened. "You should not be here." Aisha's pulse quickened. "Why not?" the old man sighed. "Because the dead do not like to be disturbed." Aisha exchanged a nervous glance with Kohler. Something wasn't right. Despite the villagers' warnings, Aisha insisted on finding Femi's grave. A reluctant young boy finally pointed them toward the old cemetery located deep in the forest. The graves were ancient, some of them crumbling with age. The air was heavy, and even the wind barely whispered through the trees. Finally, they found it. A weathered headstone covered in moss. Femi Lawal, born 1975, died 1999. Aisha's knees went weak. He had been dead for over 20 years, but she had been with him, touched him, kissed him, borne his children. Kola crouched beside the grave, brushing away the dirt. "This is real," he murmured. "But that means—" Before he could finish, a low, guttural voice spoke behind them. "You should not have come here." Aisha whirled around and gasped. An old woman stood there, her eyes milky white, her hands adorned with strange symbols. "You are the wife," she whispered, "the one who bore the cursed children." Aisha's breath hitched. "Cursed?" The woman pointed at her belly. "They carry his blood." The blood of the unrested Aisha took a step back. "What does that mean?" But before the woman could answer, the wind howled through the trees and suddenly the ground beneath them shifted. And from the earth, something moved. The soil trembled. Aisha stumbled backward, heart pounding as the ground beneath Femi's grave cracked open. A deep groan echoed through the air, and then a hand emerged from the dirt. Aisha screamed. Kola grabbed her arm, pulling her away. "We need to go. Now." The old woman merely watched, her face impassive. "You wanted the truth," she said. "Now you will see it." The hand, no, the thing that had risen from the grave looked human, but its fingers were elongated, the skin stretched too tight over its bones. And then, as the last of the dirt crumbled away, a familiar face surfaced. Femi. But it wasn't the Femi Aisha had known. His skin was grey, his eyes sunken, his lips cracked and unmoving. And yet, he looked at her. "Aisha," his voice rasped. Aisha's entire body went cold. Kola pulled her harder. "Aisha, we're leaving." But she couldn't move, because somewhere beneath the horror of it all, she felt something else. Femi had come back for her. Kola dragged Aisha away from the grave, sprinting back through the forest toward the village. But even as they ran, Femi's voice followed her. "Aisha, don't leave me." The sound of his voice tore through her, but she couldn't look back. She didn't dare. When they finally reached the village square, the old woman was already there waiting for them. It was as if she had never moved. "You should not have disturbed him," she said. Aisha was panting, her entire body trembling. "What is he?" The old woman sighed, motioning for her to sit. "Your husband was not meant to return. His spirit was never put to rest. When he died, someone brought him back." Aisha swallowed. "Who?" The woman looked at her solemnly. "Only you can answer that." Aisha's mind reeled. Who brought Femi back? And why? As the shadows lengthened around them, she realized one terrible thing. She still didn't know the full truth, but now she had no choice but to find it. The weight of the old woman's words pressed heavily on Aisha's chest. "Your husband was not meant to return. His spirit was never put to rest." Her hands clenched into fists. "Then tell me, how is this possible? Who brought him back?" The woman studied Aisha carefully, her milky white eyes unreadable. Then she stood, motioning for them to follow. "There is one who knows," she murmured, "but she does not give answers freely." Aisha exchanged a wary glance with Kola, but they had come too far to turn back now. They followed the old woman through the village, past the small huts and dirt roads, toward the dense forest that stretched beyond the settlement. The path wound deeper into the trees, the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and burning incense. Strange symbols were carved into the bark of the trees, and the further they walked, the quieter the world seemed to become. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie silence that wrapped around them like a warning. Finally, they arrived at a small shrine, barely visible beneath the twisted roots of a massive tree. Smoke curled from a clay pot in front of the entrance, and a hunched figure sat in the shadows, rocking back and forth. "Priestess Morayo," the old woman called. The figure stopped rocking. Slowly she turned, her face partially hidden by a veil of beads. "You have brought her," the priestess said, her voice dry and brittle like old parchment. The old woman nodded. "She seeks the truth." Priestess Morayo let out a long sigh. The truth is dangerous. Aisha stepped forward, ignoring the chill creeping up her spine. I need to know what happened to my husband, why he came back, why he was never meant to. The priestess was silent for a long moment. Then she gestured toward a wooden bowl filled with dark water. Look, she commanded. Aisha hesitated, but then knelt before the bowl, peering into the liquid. The surface rippled, and suddenly, a vision appeared. The water darkened, swirling like ink. Aisha saw a younger version of Femi standing in a clearing at dusk. He was not alone. A woman stood before him, her eyes burning with rage and heartbreak. You swore to love me, she screamed. Femi took a step back. Please, I never meant to hurt you. But the woman's fury only grew. She raised her hands, and suddenly the sky darkened. The air shimmered with something unnatural, something powerful. If I cannot have you, no one will, she cried. And then she cursed him. Aisha gasped as she watched the scene unfold. Femi fell to his knees, clutching his chest as an unseen force seemed to drain the life from him. The woman whispered something in a language Aisha did not understand, and then he collapsed. The vision shifted. The woman stood over his lifeless body, her expression unreadable. You will never rest, Femi Lawal. You will wander unloved, unseen, until someone loves you enough to bring you back. The water stilled. The vision faded. Aisha fell back, her breath shallow. That woman, she cursed him. Priestess Morayo nodded solemnly. She bound his soul to this world, neither dead nor alive. When you loved him, truly, deeply, you unknowingly broke the spell that kept him from returning. Aisha's stomach twisted. So I brought him back? Yes. Tears burned her eyes. She had given Femi a second life, a stolen existence that was never meant to last. But now that I know, what do I do? She whispered. The priestess fixed her with a knowing gaze. You must set him free. Aisha couldn't breathe. Set him free? How could she let him go after everything? Kola put a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, but she was alone. No one else had loved Femi the way she had. No one else had held him at night, built a life with him, borne his children, and now she had to let him go. How do I do it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Priestess Morayo pointed to a bundle of white cloth beside her. You must return to his grave, call his name, tell him you forgive him, tell him to rest. Aisha clenched her fists. And if I don't? The priestess's expression darkened. Then he will remain, trapped, neither here nor there, and his soul will never find peace. Aisha wiped her eyes. She knew what she had to do. That night she would go back, and she would say goodbye. Before leaving, Aisha called her mother. Mama, she whispered, I need to tell you something. Her mother's voice was tired but patient. What is it, my daughter? Aisha hesitated. How could she explain this? How could she tell her mother that the man she had married had been dead the entire time? But before she could speak, her mother sighed. I always knew something was wrong, Aisha, she admitted softly. Femi, he was too perfect, too much like a dream. Tears welled in Aisha's eyes. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were happy. Silence stretched between them. But now, her mother continued, you must do what's right. Not just for you, but for BC and Tolu. A woman cannot hold on to the dead forever, Aisha. Aisha swallowed hard. I know, Mama. Aisha stood before Femi's grave, the white cloth in her trembling hands. Kola stood behind her, silent but ready if she needed him. The night was still. Not even the wind stirred. She took a deep breath and spoke. Femi, she whispered, I love you. The air grew thick, heavy. The temperature dropped. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why we were given time together when we weren't supposed to. But I know one thing. A tear slipped down her cheek. You were real to me. A shadow moved between the trees. A faint glow flickered at the edge of the grave. I forgive you, she said, her voice breaking. I forgive you for not telling me the truth. I forgive you for leaving. The light grew stronger. Aisha sucked in a breath as she saw him, Femi. He stood before her just as she remembered him, but this time he was different. He was at peace. "Aisha," he whispered, smiling, "thank you." And then he was gone, for the last time. The silence after Femi disappeared was suffocating. Aisha stood frozen at his grave, her heart pounding as the last traces of his presence faded into the wind. The air that had once felt so heavy with unseen energy was now still, empty. She had done it. She had set him free. Yet, as she turned away, a strange sensation washed over her, like she was being watched. Aisha glanced around, but the cemetery was deserted except for Kola, who stood a few steps behind her, his eyes sharp with concern. "You all right?" he asked. She opened her mouth to say yes, but then, a whisper, "Aisha." Her breath hitched. She spun around, scanning the dark forest that surrounded them. The graves stretched endlessly beneath the moonlight, their worn-out stones standing like silent witnesses to her sorrow. Nothing moved. No shadows. No figures. But she had heard it. Femi's voice. A chill crawled up her spine. Had she really set him free? She pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her heartbeat. It was probably just her mind playing tricks on her. Letting go of someone she had loved so deeply, someone she had built a life with, wasn't easy. Maybe the ache of it had made her imagine things. Still, as she and Kola walked away from the graveyard, she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still lingering, watching, waiting. The days that followed were strange. The house in Lekki felt eerily different. The once warm halls now carried an emptiness she couldn't explain, even with BC and Tolu running around, their laughter filling the space. Yet, despite Femi's absence, his presence still lingered. Sometimes, when she was alone in their bedroom, she would catch a faint scent of his cologne. Other times she would hear footsteps in the hall at night, soft, measured, familiar. One evening she tucked BC into bed, kissing her forehead as she always did. As she turned to leave, her daughter grabbed her wrist. "Mummy," BC said sleepily. "Daddy says good night." Aisha's heart nearly stopped. She swallowed hard. "What did you say, baby?" BC yawned. "Daddy. He was here." Aisha's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" Her daughter turned onto her side, hugging her teddy bear. "He comes when you're sad." Aisha sat frozen. Had she really let him go? Or was love powerful enough to tether him to them? Even in death, she placed a hand over her face, exhaling shakily. If Femi was still watching over them, was she truly ready to say goodbye? 1 month later, Aisha stood by the shores of the Lagos Lagoon, watching the water ripple under the morning sun. This was where Femi had taken her on their first date. Where he had held her hand and promised her a love greater than any she had ever known. And he had kept that promise. Even in death, she closed her eyes, letting the salty breeze kiss her skin. For so long she had lived in the shadow of the unknown. She had loved a man who wasn't meant to exist, borne his children, built a life with him. And in the end, she had set him free. But some part of her would always wonder, was he truly gone? A gentle wind brushed past her, warm and soft, wrapping around her like a silent embrace. And in that moment, she knew. Femi would always be there, not as a ghost, not as a restless soul, but in the memories they had built, in the children they had created, in the love that had never wavered, not even in the face of death. She smiled to herself, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she turned and walked away, toward the life waiting for her, toward the future, and this time she wasn't looking back. The end.